All right, welcome to Problem Solver Politics. I am your host, Cardinellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everybody.
And we are actually here to analyze the new situation that the DNC has put forth for the Iowa caucuses and qualifying for the next debate stage. Andrew Yang very, not verbosely, but confidently declared that's the last debate that I'll miss. And now we've got, actually it's kind of old news by now, the new qualification requirements, but there's been a lot of debates on whether, what this caucusing is, whether it will help or not, how it differs from traditional, single vote cast primaries. I think this is a huge net benefit to Andrew Yang because this is something that the Yang gang will definitely excel at. And a lot of those intangibles that I, mentioned in many of our first 3 to 6 months worth of videos will actually start paying off. To me, this is like real democracy, dog, when there's a bunch of people in the room and they're all screaming and they're all chanting, and it's like the House of Commons in England, like, "Oh, knave, you would bring us to destruction. Oh, you Frenchman loving fool." That's real democracy. If we're just going to have a mobocratic democracy instead of a representational republic, I at least want people screaming at each other, okay? And the Yang gang can probably scream louder. So, anyway, I've hypersimplified this. Cody, tell us what's going on.
Of course, well, first of all, welcome back, everyone. We took a couple days off for the long weekend, so we're back now. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day, everyone. Anyway, so here's what you're talking about. So this was back on the 17th. Typical Friday news dump kind of thing. We'll drop the requirements for the debate, and then we'll go on do whatever we do in the weekends for politicians. Anyways, from Democrats.org. So DNC announces qualification criteria for New Hampshire Democratic presidential primary debate. In here, there is one. We'll go through more, and Carter was kind of talking about it. Andrew Yang 1000% should be on this debate stage coming up next. Yeah. If he misses the debate stage here, something went awfully wrong, and I'd bet the farm that he doesn't miss it. And we'll get into why in a second. So here we go. So the DNC and ABC today released the qualification criteria for participation in the 8th Democratic presidential debate, which will air on ABC in partnership with, Apple News will be partner. Anyway, moving further down, they get to the official threshold rules. So to qualify for the February 7th, 2020 Democratic presidential debate in New Hampshire, candidates must meet the delegate threshold or the alternative threshold as detailed below. Now, this is interesting for Andrew Yang. So the delegate threshold. To meet the delegate threshold for the New Hampshire delegate debate, candidates must have been allocated at least one pledged delegate to the Democratic National Convention from the state of Iowa based on the result of the February 3rd, 2020 Iowa caucus, as reported and calculated by the Iowa Democratic Party. Now, they then get into the alternative threshold. To meet the alternative threshold for the New Hampshire debate, candidates must meet the polling requirement and the grassroots funding thresholds as detailed below. And then they get into the polling requirement, which we're all fairly... I'll go over it if you aren't, but this has been what they've been using for every debate prior to this.
The same old four polls nationally, or it's 2 early states.
And I just want to touch on the fact it's 5%, and it does backdate as the other ones have. So what that means for Andrew Yang on polling, we'll quickly touch this for 1 second. Here's our good friend Zach Montalero over at Politico, puts together this nice spreadsheet, and we can see that Andrew Yang currently has 2 of the qualifying polls at 5% he would need. Got a couple 4s in there, a couple 3s. It looks like he probably by the next couple weeks could potentially get them. However, really quickly, I want to go back, and I'm sure a lot of you guys caught this. That's only the fallback for qualification if you miss out on the delegate threshold.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure, Carl, you have a lot more to say about this than me, but if Andrew Yang does not get one pledged delegate in Iowa, I don't care if he's polling at 17% in some random poll from Emerson or something. Like, that is the news. Like, Andrew Yang should definitely be coming away with a pledged delegate in Iowa here, right?
I see it as being very difficult unless there was some kind of, like in Ohio where they filled the paperwork out wrong, and
some errors,
and he has to be a write-in candidate for the presidency in Ohio. Barring some kind of massive categorical error on behalf of the Yang campaign, I find it very difficult that he won't get one pledged delegate.
Especially with the Iowa the ground game of Yang supporters in Iowa recently.
Yeah, and here's the reason why. I mean, I'm actually really curious. In the comments below, let us know if you've been to a caucus for anything. Okay. There's all kinds of organizations that aren't just political organizations that run voting through a caucus system instead of just like, a simple single ballot vote system or whatever. But caucusing, bro, is really fun. And I think the Yang gang would be good at it. And here's the difference. Can I go over the differences and whatnot?
Oh, by all means, please. Then afterwards, really quickly, we can run through the political article.
So basically, like, for example, when I was on the GOP Central Committee, it's a 7-member committee, and we can't really hold our meeting unless there's a caucus, which means that there's 4 out of 7 people there, right? Because our caucus was declared as being a majority caucus, okay? Anyway, the way caucuses are held is basically you have to show up to the location. And this is where the first part of the fun happens, because now instead of just like voting by mail before you go to work or, going to the ballot box on your way home from soccer practice or whatever, like there's or cast your ballot online, there's actually a physical location you have to go to. So it's kind of fun. It's like the difference between watching an NBA game and going to an NBA game. All right. It's totally awesome. So you head to this location and then everybody's like, just like balled out with their gear. Like if they're a Biden person, they got the Biden things on. If they're a Bernie person, underneath their beard and the insects crawling out of their beard, you know what I'm saying? They've got like their Bernie bling. And then of course there's like the Steyer people who were just paid on Craigslist to show up. But anyway, you actually head to the location and then everybody's in these groups, and then there's the early worms that show up and they're making noise and they're making noise, and then more people show up, and then other people come in, like one of them's got a boom box and he's blasting his personal, let's just say it's a Yang Gang song. Like it's actually really fun seeing how each one of these groups support their candidate. Now, honestly, as long as everybody's well behaved and they're very pro their candidate, it's a positive experience. Every once in a while when they start jeering at each other, a fight might break out or something like that. But anyway, the different groups show up, and then ultimately at a certain time they shut the doors. Okay, they shut the door. So usually it's like there's a registration and an entrance time. I believe in Andrew Yang's case it's going to be 6:30 to 7. But like at 7 p.m. they shut the doors, and the reason why is because they have to count the amount of people there. You know what I'm saying? And if 1,200 people showed up and your 52 people that are for Julian Castro are there, sorry, you're not 15% of the 1,200. Okay? So now you could choose to join another group. You're non-viable. You could choose to go home if you want to. You can sit in the corner and stay and do nothing. Or you can go to that group over there of Martin O'Malley's friends, you know what I'm saying, that are still holding out. And you can join them, and you can hopefully create your own caucus group of 15% with all of like the B team. And basically that starts happening. So they close the doors so they know what group there is so they can measure the percentages. And then each candidate has a different percentage of people that show up. And then all of the non-viables end up joining those groups or creating their own. And so pretty soon it's almost like watching cells, like when oil is with water. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like watching the different groups like bond and then break. And then finally there usually ends up being anywhere between as little as 3 and as much as usually 5 or 6. Because after all, you can only have so many 15s stacked into 100%. You know what I'm saying? There usually really ends up being kind of like a top 2 or 3 and then like that 4th group. And then that's when it gets really cool. You know what I'm saying? Because then to choose the winner of that night and the caucus, this isn't how it's done in Iowa, but like, for example, in other places, they will then have oftentimes, pledge delegates that will just be assigned and vote, or other times they'll have an audible vote, like a cheer vote, like, and then a judge will sit up and be like, okay, who's for candidate A? And then everybody screams from candidate A group. And I mean, it is the closest thing to medieval, like Europe, where like the Vikings have been spotted on the horizon. Will you fight? You know what I'm saying? Everyone's like, yeah. Or also like, not so much. We're going to go home. You know what I'm saying? So it is so fun, so rad. And the reason why I actually think this is good for Andrew Yang is because historically, youth-driven movements, like here we're talking Martin Luther King Day, okay? The youth-driven movement of the Freedom Riders on the buses were able to garner much more press attention than negative influences against them. Historically, candidates like Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama, people that attracted a lot of youth, a lot of memes, a lot of energy, do much better at over-representing themselves than maybe larger, more supported, at least in terms of population, candidates like John Kasich, for example. You know what I'm saying? But nobody's going to be like, popping the hood down on a convertible in Iowa in the middle of January so they can start blasting John Kasich music in 2016.
Was it John?
Yeah,
I don't
John.
Remember. Oh, okay. I knew it was Kasich. I don't remember if it was John or not.
I thought it was John Kasich. I hope I'm not making myself look idiotic.
Right. No,
but like traveling back to the 2016 Iowa caucuses, nobody was going to be doing that for John Kasich, all right? But there was like, I'm
John.
getting the thumbs up.
It was John.
Okay, it is John Kasich. Okay. So anyway, but there were people that were doing that for like Donald Trump, for example. There were people that were doing that for Bernie Sanders, okay? There's people that do that for freaking Vermin Supreme, all right? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, Andrew Yang and his Yang gang are much more fun and enthusiastic. So I really think they will have a chance to very much over-represent themselves. And especially with a lot of these other smaller delegates that are going to get hammered. There's ex-Beto O'Rourke people out there. There are ex-Julian Castro people. There's ex-Cory Booker people. And let me tell you, I bet you there's more Cory Booker people who would rather go over to the enthusiastic Yang Gang camp than the not so enthusiastic Elizabeth Warren camp. If asked at home to vote on a paper ballot, they'd probably say, well, my boy was Booker, but Booker's out. We're this floating 2% out there. Who might I cast my vote for? Elizabeth Warren, because she probably has a better chance of beating Donald Trump. Or also, I don't even know who Yang is or whatever, because in the peace and quiet of their own home, uninfluenced by the energetic fervor of those guys over there in the corner with their math hats saying freedom dividend, or whatever they're saying. You know what I'm saying? But if you're there and you're on location, you're like, I care about politics. I'm showing up to caucus. The Warren people aren't going to impress you. The Buttigieg people are doing their, stupid little dance. You know what I'm saying? But then there's like these Yang people that are like, yeah, going nuts. And that will actually sway you. So anyway, I think right now, and I'm sorry, Cody, you got to jump in on this. I've talked way too much. But I think caucuses are a good thing for Andrew Yang because he has a historic campaign. And he also has a very youth-driven campaign. And the freedom dividend makes for a good soundbite. When you're trying to convince people from another group to come over, you don't have time for a 1-minute conversation about effective tax rates. Hey, come join the guy that wants to give $1,000 a month. Screw the corporations. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a better soundbite than trying to explain the federal jobs guarantee or trying to explain Elizabeth Warren's fake Medicare for all that's really just, nationalizing the U.S. economy. So anyway, I think this is a good thing for Andrew Yang. Cody, I don't think you're as big a fan of caucuses.
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. I think, like I said before, I'm betting the farm on Yang being in the February debate because I would be dumbfounded if of the 41 delegates up for grab in Iowa, Andrew Yang doesn't come home with one, especially after. It's one of the reasons why I kind of want to talk about why I think it's so beneficial for this to be obviously results are going to matter for debates as we moved on. Like it'd be kind of dumb if they're like, well, sorry, you got 7 delegates in Iowa, but you didn't get 5% in this poll. So, it doesn't make any sense. So obviously it's going to count, but remember, and we talked this before, I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this video know, but if you haven't, it started off as Yang Week. It's been Yang Month now. It's basically, Iowa's been the epicenter of Andrew Yang grassroots support for the last, I guess, like roughly month. Yeah, early January till now. And this is where, because you're talking about that, it's one of the reasons why, to be honest, personally, I don't like caucusing. I think it's to me, there's more than practical reasons why a voting booth is a one-person thing. I think it's an intimate setting for a reason. It's not just intimate so people can't look over your shoulder. It's because literally when you go to cast your ballot, it's just you. Now, you brought up a good point earlier, which is that primaries aren't actually elections anyway, which they aren't.
Yeah.
However, if we're talking about
because this is inter-party, not intra-party. No, this is intra-party. Oh, I'm messing up the prefix.
Yeah, well, remember, the DNC
but this is party politics, not FEC politics.
The DNC actually has argued in a court of law that there's no reason why they should be expected to run a legitimate election. I'll pull this source up. I pulled it up in the past. Legitimately in a courtroom, they had a lawyer say, well, there's like political rhetoric saying we have a fair and open election. It's not, and we rig it for Hillary. And they said, the courts, by the way, didn't accept this interpretation.
If they go to
said, no, people have a right to expect you to have a fair election. You can't just tell people it's a fair and balanced election and then have it be a phony sham. So the courts have said you can't do that, but it's a good point to bring up that this, generally speaking, is primaries are a little bit less
because
formal.
like, for example, when I'm having our meetings on the central committee for the party and we all vote on something and we pass like our own resolution, since that's just party politics, that doesn't have to be an FEC monitored monitored election because it's inside the party.
Would you not say, though, that one of the only two viable political parties in the entire country deciding who's running in a general election has got a bit more gravity to it than how essentially a social club decides how they want to spend their money? You know what I mean?
It absolutely does. Okay, no, you are totally correct.
But before we get too far off topic, I just want to touch on one more thing.
Okay, hit it.
Because I don't want to talk more about that. Before we do, I don't want to forget this. I just want one more last thing we're capping on, because here's the other thing to talk about. It's another thing we talk about in the caucusing with the viability threshold. And just to get to your point, it's the last thing I want to bring up. It's the reason why I think Yang Month and all this stuff is so viable, so crucial, and so important is because there needs to be you have to engage people to get out in the streets, right? And it's the one thing I want to touch on you talked about a little bit, which is really good. Like I said, I prefer a more intimate voting system. However, there is hurdles with the caucus being, if you work nights, you might not be able to show up in caucus, right? If you can't figure out transportation, there's a lot of stuff. But that's why it's so important, I think, for a campaign like Andrew Yang, which, by the way, he's doing a 17-day bus tour through the state right now, I believe.
Yeah.
I think best wishes. I think one of his media people actually got gout from the diet of being on a tour bus basically all the time, in Iowa. So best wishes to him. But I think it's one of the things that makes is the Yang campaign and the Yang gang laying this grassroots, this fundamental support. Because here's the thing about this: I wonder how many people know about this delegate thing that goes on all the time. The caucuses, they know about it, and they're just like, it's cold, it's at night. It's one of the reasons why having those people there to lay out those infrastructures on how we're going to go about this, I think is so important. So I was going to cut you off. I really want to talk about that because I think it's, like they say, flood the state, get as many Yang gang in the state of Iowa as possible for 1 month of intensive campaigning. Seems to be going on pretty well. Yeah. And then get 15%. It's the important thing is so much of this is literally just getting the people to show up at the church or the gymnasium or whatever it is to do the thing. And it's the reason why I firmly believe there's no chance Andrew Yang, because if Andrew Yang walks away from Iowa with 0 delegates, missing the debate stage is the last of his worries. I mean, He's invested so hard in the state. So many people have been doing there, doing so much work. I mean, I believe he'll overperform in Iowa, as that we were talking about before. It's happened with both Bernie Sanders in 2016 and Obama in 2008, because similar kind of campaigns, a lot of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm does seem to win the caucusing. The reason why I don't like it, because I don't like the idea of people who aren't as enthusiastic, no less valid in their opinions, just not as enthusiastic about it.
Is this the introvert in you not liking a system in which you may not excel?
No, it's the fairness in me, not liking a system that excludes certain people from the process.
No, but hold on. You could make the argument, though. Maybe a loudmouth that's used to be maligned for being a loudmouth finally brings an advantage to the table. You know what I'm saying? An enthusiastic person finally has an advantage in a world that says, hell no, get out of here, weirdo.
Okay, but
those Bernie bros that we saw in Nevada, they were bringing it. They were in it to win it. And I was like, I'm not a Bernie bro, but dude, man, like, if I wanted to hang out in a corner, I'd want to hang out in yours because you were freaking excited.
Again, no offense.
And then the Yang gang was the same way. They were awesome. They were wicked. I've got to tell you, if I was sitting in the Elizabeth Warren camp next to him, I'd be like, dude, I'm a Warren gal, but I'd rather be hanging out with you, Yang gang. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it's not fairness or non-fairness. It is in what scenario does what personality trait become advantageous or disadvantageous?
Okay, depending on the way you frame badgering people into accepting your opinion, I don't like it. Okay,
it's not badgering; it's cheering.
Oh, I'm just in your face yelling and
no, they're not in your face.
I'm just bringing my energy to you and enforcing on you what I think.
Where were you when we went to best or first in the West?
I was there.
That is basically a caucus, for lack of a better term. Except for there was kind of this weird, almost assigned seating, and you had to pre-purchase
really
tickets.
Good
but
for events, for the party to gauge interest. I don't like the idea that I was an Elizabeth Warren supporter. I'm not, but say I am, and I show up, and because I just really don't want to argue that much, I end up voting for a candidate that I don't really want to vote for that much. I'm not here to get in a fight.
Then you are, I can't say this word on YouTube. Scaredy cat.
What, a coward?
You know what I'm saying?
I think it's cowardly to show up to someone and start. I know you showed up here for this candidate, but no, it's like they're just. I think
no. That's where you coax people. That's the difference between a good salesman and the guy that's a pushy salesman. Nobody likes the pushy salesman, and they don't do as well. But the guy that's like, hey, I see you like him. Oh, that's great. I think he's a great candidate too. Oh, you guys didn't qualify. Hey, I think a lot of your values are shared over here. Why don't you come support us? You know what I'm saying? Like that's the difference.
That is the charitable. That's the most charitable. I'm just saying.
Because in America though,
it goes both ways. I agree. There were people there who are just like, look, man, Yang about this stuff, and for the Yang gang, that's by and large what I'm expecting. People to be very cordial and humanity first. I'm just saying it's a system. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it's going to be great for Yang. I'm not saying it's awful and should be done away with. I'm just saying I like the individual. You know where it comes from? It's not because I am a hardcore individualist. And to me, the individual goes into the one room with the four walls and him or her, and that person casts their one vote. I prefer that. I'm not saying it's the best way of doing things. I just, as a hardcore individualist, it's the individual way of doing things and what I prefer. The fervor, I could see why
it's
though.
Evolutionary, dog.
No, I guess
it's the tribe. It's like, oh, we're Yang Gang! Rah!
And as you pointed out, though, yeah, it's the reason why Andrew Yang really, really should not be kept out. I guess the only last point I want to make on this is the fact that this, with them now moving over to this is going to be the first time they can't. It's not going to be their polls. It's not going to be their polling. It's not going to be their thresholds. He's either going to perform in Iowa or he isn't. And I think he's going to perform in Iowa. But it's at the point where the media can't. He doesn't have to meet the media standards anymore. He finally has to meet the people standards, which has to win the election anyway.
That's a great phrase.
And this is that first time. It's the reason why I think he's going to pass this test definitely. And I think it's great. It's great news that this is the system because Again, if Andrew Yang misses out on the delegate, that is the story. It's not him missing out on the debate. It's, wow, what went wrong in Iowa, but I do not foresee having that conversation.
Dude,
However, anything can happen. Don't literally bet the farm. However, I'm almost 1,000% confident Andrew Yang is indeed going to get one of these delegates to be in the debate stage.
You know, if you're Yang Gang, you probably don't have a farm. All right.
True. There's farmers for Yang.
He does well in urban centers. And no, I'm just kidding.
No, that is
actually,
true.
I completely said that knowing that the comments would just flare up with like some guy that's like, shut up, man, I got a farm. And then I was actually going to follow up that statement with, I would actually really like to interview farmers for Yang because I have seen a couple of these posts where some people have gone really in depth talking about how, like his policy on X, Y, or Z thing would affect trade, which would affect this tariff, which would affect this export of this kind of like soybean that I make or whatever. And there's been some really interesting, really insightful takes from these rural Yang Gang supporters that are super cool. So if you are one of those farmers for Yang, hey, reach out, man. Or if you're even just somebody with a non-urban center view like the usual New York and Los Angeles Yang Gangers that we meet all the time. You know what I'm saying? Let us know as well what you think. And if you're in Iowa caucusing, like just tell us what it's like on the floor. And I got to say, Cody, we got to start. Do you remember Jim Rome?
I remember when Jim Rome baited a quarterback into fighting him on camera. I remember that.
Okay, well, that was before he had his change of heart. He was one of my dad's favorite sports commentators. You and my dad are probably the most sports commentator listening people I know. But anyway, Jim Rome all the time, if a caller had a really good call in. As a kid, I grew up listening to Jim Rome with my dad and like Dr. Laura with my mom. But anyway, Jim Rome would be like, epic, rack 'em. And that meant that his assistant would have to take the best clip of what that person just said. And like at the end of the day, he'd play all the best clips. And at the end of the week, he'd play all the best clips. And like at the end of the year, he'd have like all of his favorite from all of the racks, right? I would want to rack what you said if I were Jim Rome. I'd want to rack what you said about this is the first time where he hasn't had to live up to the media standards. He's had to live up to the people's standards. And those are the people that are cheering. Rah! It's like Braveheart when he's like, freedom! You know what I'm saying?
Again, we've had this conversation before. How did Braveheart end?
Yeah, okay, so it's not a perfect analogy. But anyway, the last thing I'll say before we close here is that the other kind of cool thing about caucuses is that it really levels the playing field because rarely, even if somebody's got like 50% of the vote in a poll, rarely in these caucus events will they have 50% of the caucus. You know what I'm saying? Like if you even look at the caucus predictions right now, like on Wikipedia, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren are all at like 20. And it's a difference between 20.3, 20.7, and 20.2. You know, it has this kind of leveling effect because now when you're dealing with a population, there's much more of a predictable bell curve than these very different mathematical results because, you know, there's that human element that's involved. So it kind of has a tendency to humble the people on top while simultaneously giving a boost because if somebody survives a caucus just out of sheer like yang gang enthusiasm, well, they're walking away with 15 or 17% and when those results get published, the caucus results get published in the newspaper, people look at them and they think, whoa, this Yang guy's got 17%? What? Who's Yang? And, oh, okay, Biden walked away with 20, you know? They don't realize that in the real, like, regular polls, Yang's struggling to get 5 sometimes. And, you know, half the other people are like, I'll just vote for Biden.
But see, use the word there. I wasn't going to say anything else, but there's one word. It sums up my...
regular people?
No, my opposition to the caucus system.
The word cock in the caucus?
Survive. You shouldn't be surviving this. If people support you, they should be showing up to vote for you. It shouldn't be this.
I want Hunger Games politics.
I do somewhat like the idea of putting your supporters like faith to the metal. Like one, it's like that one.
Well, that's
last,
where leaders are born. That's where leaders are born.
Right when you're about to make it, someone comes up to you and confronts you and says, "Do you actually believe in this?" And it's like, I don't know. Like I think that's interesting, but I don't know.
I guarantee.
To me, I prefer. And by the way, it's worth noting. One last thing is worth noting. Very unique what Iowa does for the primary. Most states, not all, most states just have
but Cody,
this is atypical and specific to Iowa. And from what I've read, it's almost like one of those things where it's like, why don't they get rid of it? And they're like, well, because we do things that way here. And it's like, there's not that much rhyme or reason to why they actually do it anymore. Just kind of tradition.
Okay, but Cody, look, when gamers rise.
Gamers will rise.
Okay? When gamers rise and you are championing that revolution and you are the head of the gamers who have risen and you show up in the caucus for the gamer party, right? And you see 4 dudes of the 500 that have showed up to caucus for you. There's 4 dudes that are really out there saying like, Cody, go, Cody, go. You know what I'm saying? Like, but got some like crazy chant that they've made. You know what I'm saying? Like Oracle or bust, or like whatever they're cheering. You know what I'm saying? Like if they're there and they're let's just say Cody the Oracle.
Look,
and they're leading the cheer. Okay. Won't you see those guys? And when you get made president, won't you think, dude, those guys were leading my cheers. Those are the true warriors. I'm putting them in my cabinet. Or I'm giving them a appointed position.
But here's the thing. I didn't want to make this a massive thing about because, like I said, they do it in Iowa. It's a tradition. By all means, do it. The same way doing a traditional polling through a traditional primary vote benefits some types of candidates more than others. For example, being able to cast your ballot in does mean that people who have issues with transportation are more of an issue, or people who just like mobility, people who work a bunch. Like there are certain people that like being able to cast a ballot from home, right? Like not having to physically be somewhere. But like I said, it requires that thing. I don't want to get into the philosophy of it because, like I said, by and large, it's going to help Yang, which is interesting. I think it's neat. Iowa still does it. It's cool. Someone still does it. Personally, not a fan, but you laid out a bunch of reasons why it does benefit. And I think there is an argument too, having something like that in the not having 47 states. I mean, do it 1 or 2, like having that element in the thing. I agree. I think that's good. Having that element there. I would not want to see almost every state do it this way, but I think you're right. You made a lot of good points for why I think it's really cool to have a couple states do this thing because it is a different thing as you described it. It's not simply checking a box, putting your thing in the mail, and then seeing who wins. There is something more to it, but it's gonna help Yang. That's the takeaway. It definitely should help him. It helped Obama. It helped Bernie. I don't see why it wouldn't help Yang now, but I still have my own personal gripes. So we'll say.
Freedom dividend! Ooh, 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 ooh. That's what we got to get going on over there, man.
Well, also, we don't know the rules on the... they might have rules where you're not allowed to do stuff like that in Iowa. I don't know.
If they do, democracy is dead. Anyway.
That's actually a very true statement. When you can't simply shout down your opposition anymore, democracy has died, and we move towards a republic.
Because democracy is mobocracy. And if you can't be an awesome, happy, angry mob, then democracy has died. So anyway, Yang gang at the caucus.